Hello class, my name is Omar. I would like to introduce my group members, Selma and Austin. For our project, we chose a local bakery called Baker and Spice here in Southwest Portland in the Hillsdale neighborhood. Just to give you a brief background of the bakery, it is a small family-owned business. The business was founded in 1998 by Julie Richardson. Julie is a cookbook author, baker, and the restaurant has received a lot of recognition. It was featured in certain publications such as the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and Food 52, amongst others. Now meet the bakers.
We're the owners of Baker and Spice Bakery. So I started baking when I was 5 years old. I used to make chocolate chip cookies, Toll House cookies with my mom, and used to always make milkshakes. I remember that was something I used to love to make, little concoctions. I trained Matt in all the things he knows baking.
Right, yes. I do bread baking now, primarily. That and fix anything that breaks and do whatever needs to be done around the bakery.
Baker and Spice started as a farmer's market stall at the Portland Farmer's Market downtown.
Now I would like to discuss inventory management. One thing to keep in mind about the nature of this business is that we are dealing with perishables. Inventory cannot be kept for long periods of time. Some products have shorter shelf life than others. For example, the galette has a shelf life of up to 6 hours since it is a savory pastry meant to be eaten warm, while bread can be kept for more than overnight. Currently, Julie's inventory control is good, but it could be improved. She generally has a good idea of what to make and how many to make on any given day based on data that she has collected over the years. Julie uses a par sheet that lists all the items that she produces and records how many were made, how many were sold, the time that it was sold out, if it was sold out, how many were left over, even the weather, and even if there was a certain event that day, or just any other external factor that she thinks kind of influenced sales that day. Although Julie's inventory is not based on random assumptions and is in fact pretty efficient, she still gets it wrong at times. And one area that we believe that Julie can improve is adapting a inventory management system, some type of software that uses algorithm to collect data, which would make the data more precise, and therefore her inventory would also be more precise.
Building off of that, I'd like to talk about forecasting method. Something to keep in mind is that Julie does all the forecasting for production. When we spoke to Julie, she discussed how she really opened Baker and Spice because of her love and passion for baking breads and pastries, but she's not really enjoying the business aspect, but does it because obviously she has to. Her forecast is largely based on historicals. When she first opened 14 years ago, her demand was unknown, of course, and she baked blindly. She adjusted production each week and heavily relied on her par sheets for data. She analyzed the data the best that she could and continued to use this as a method for her forecasting. So till now, what she'll do is she'll go to past years and she'll look at her par sheets and see what she sold in that season during that time period. So she also realized doing this for 14 years that there are five factors that she mostly relies on: weather, the day of the week, Jewish holidays, winter season, school events, and bakery. So Baker and Spice is located in a very wholesome, family-oriented area. The area also has a very large and concentrated Jewish population, and so she has adapted those two things into her forecasting. When it comes to weather, she noticed that hot days, of course, people are not trying to sit in and drink some coffee. And of course, very cold days like winter snow days where school is closed, parents are not also coming by to the bakery and picking up a coffee before dropping off their kids. So if there's a snow day, she's not getting much business. The days of the week, she noticed that on Sunday she doesn't have much customers, as opposed to other days, like in the middle of the week while parents are going to work. So she takes that into consideration when forecasting. As I mentioned before, the area is heavily Jewishly concentrated, and so that affects her forecasting. Like every Friday, she makes more challah bread than any other type of bread because she knows that a lot of her Jewish customers will come. She did share that she is not from a Jewish heritage and she does not belong to the Jewish faith, but she learned about so much of the religion because they would come in and ask for particular types of pastries, and she accommodated that, and she would forecast for that. So when if she knows that there is a Jewish holiday coming up, she would forecast for that. The same thing for winter season. Winter season is where she makes the bulk of her money, and she uses the par sheets from past years to look, okay, well, this year I sold about this amount. I could see that trends are going up. I'm going to make this amount. And to some degree, it is a guess, but she is using the historicals to give her a very good estimate of how much to make. Again, schools and events is really important to her sales. She noticed that whenever the school year would end, students would come in for cookies. So she'll actually forecast to make more cookies toward the end of the year because students like to give it to their teachers as gifts. Another interesting fact that she shared with us is that on Easter, since it is a holiday that moves around, if it lands on spring break, then she will not make that much money because families will go out of town for spring break. So it was really interesting, and she also discussed how it took her so many years to catch on to these things, and that is the biggest inefficiency of her historical method, of using historical method. And Austin will discuss what a better forecasting method could be.
So up next, I'll talk about what we could recommend for her to improve her forecasting. I've included this picture of a delicious pie from their Instagram and sales that we want to see when they're selling billions of dollars of these. So next slide, please. So Baker and Spice currently doesn't have any forecasting beyond looking at what they did last year and guessing what they'll do this year. Obviously, she has a lot of experience in the business, and it served them well to be in business for as long as they have. But it's not precise, and as they go and they start looking to close those gaps, they need something a little more sophisticated. Because even the best guesser, because that's what it comes down to, any person perfectly attuned with the market, can miss out on an opportunity or not see an opportunity for new growth because they're entirely based on current and past sales. So the seen that except people are coming in and asking. But if she had been forecasting and to find capacity for something else, maybe she could have moved into it sooner. And if all the forecasting is done based on those past sales, it limits the planning to just the people with the skill and experience to do so. Which would more or less just be her at the top right now. That severely limits her expansion capabilities. And training new employees to get where they need to, so she could step back perhaps, is going to be very expensive, very time consuming, and is not conducive to ever growing the business beyond its one location. Unfortunately, we were not able to get either past data of what their sales were or their past forecasting. So unfortunately, I can't go back and reverse engineer it and find out exactly what they were doing and what we could do to help. But just with the qualitative information they have given us from this point of view, we can give a recommendation. So we have picked linear regression with what we recommend to Baker and Spice because the products are fairly steady with some large spikes on holidays, as mentioned. So you can use the previous year's data as a single factor to adjust the normal forecast by, and we specifically chose the linear regression over exponential smoothing was the other one that came up close, because it's generally smooth with such large spikes. Exponential smoothing would kind of pull in between those two, so we'd be over much of the time, which is very expensive, and possibly under on the holidays themselves. There's always more minute forecasting to do on that type of thing. With a linear regression, I feel like it's a little bit easier to add that in, more practical for someone who has no forecasting experience at all to try to implement it. Next slide, please. Thank you so much for listening. We hope you enjoyed the presentation. If you would like to try some of the food we pictured here, all of these are Baker and Spice's actual products from their Instagram. You can visit them at 6306 Southwest Capitol Highway in Portland. I would love to if I had the ability, but I'm unfortunately based all the way down in Los Angeles now. Next visit I make, I'm probably going to come visit them.